この動画は全部日本語でやらないけど、イントロだけは日本語でやるね。今日は普通の方法よりも早く日本語を学んだやり方を紹介して、それが一番いい量を話すね。言語を理解するって聞いたり話したりするときにあまり考えなくて済む方がいいよね。だから俺の方法はそこを目指してる。そうすれば母国語みたいに使えるんだ。無理だって思う人もいるけど、俺はそうは思わない。ただ正しいアプローチが見逃されてるだけだと思う。それに正直字幕なしでアニメを見るのってめっちゃ気持ちいいんだよね。じゃあ始めようか。Let's make the music for this video. So as I lay down the soundtrack really quick, I want to say right away, this is not a learn effortlessly method. Yes, this is fast, it's very fast, but it's not easy. I want you to know that up front so you know what you're getting into. But I believe in you, so let's get started. The main concepts that you should keep in mind when you're learning a language are these three things. Number one, through repetition, language learning becomes subconscious. Number two, your brain is more efficient in language learning than you will ever understand. And number three, discomfort during practice equals comfort when using the language, and comfort during practice equals discomfort when using the language. Now, you guys know I'm not a grind set mindset guy. I don't believe in that. But the third one, I really want you to pay attention to that, just moving forward in general. Okay, the steps of learning a language. Here's the prelude. Learn the very basics of grammar. This should take you like 1 day max. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but grammar is something that you really want to learn in context. I believe in isolation, grammar is kind of useless unless you're just trying to understand how the language works, which is what this day is for, this time is for. You just want to understand how it works, but as far as practical use, it's way better to learn that when you learn sentences. Because our goal is to make the language work without really having to think about it. Just like in your native language, you don't really think about conjugations and all these rules. You kind of just think of the idea and the thought or sentence comes out. That's all you want to do in your target language. So leveraging the basics of grammar actually gives you an advantage, but again, we're not doing a deep dive here. So what to look up as far as grammar? I would personally recommend using ChatGPT because it gets a lot of the upfront work out of the way. And you can simply ask it, what are the rules and grammar of Japanese or whatever language you're trying to study? Things you want to focus on learning are things like sentence structure, formal and informal speech, basic conjugations, and other things like that. Also, another prompt you can put in is, as a English speaker, what are some things I should know about whatever language? Or you can change the languages around to fit you. But if you're watching this for Japanese, you could say, as an English speaker, what are some things I should know about Japanese? I would highly recommend leveraging AI because this stuff used to take me days or weeks to do, but you can do it in just a few prompts. So why only the basics? I kind of went over this already, but grammar is something you want to learn in context. I just really want to make that clear. I know we can get caught up in grammar rules and conjugations and trying to say everything right, but your brain is going to pick that up whether you want it to or not. It's just going to happen. I realized this in Japan when I was at work, and my coworkers used to ask me sentences in English or things in English. None of them spoke English, but they would ask me things and I wasn't able to explain it. And on the inverse, I would ask them Japanese questions that I had, and they weren't able to explain it. So we were both kind of lost on grammar, yet we knew how to make the thoughts come out in a sentence format. This is something that's going to be uncomfortable for a while, but you have to trust the process because again, we want to make the language work without really having to think about it. I'm probably going to put up a black screen every time I say that because I really want you to know that. Okay, that was the prelude. So step one is learn 2,000 to 4,000 of the most common vocabulary words. Now again, before you think I'm crazy, I'm going to tell you why you should do this up front. Honestly, it's because you save years of study time right away. Unfortunately, traditional methods that are pushed, they have you kind of taking a slow route where you're gradually increasing difficulty of things. That's fine and it works. But the problem is it takes forever to learn enough vocabulary to be comfortable enough to use it in a real sense. I believe the word on the internet is comprehensible input or something like that. I'm not really sure. I don't know who made it. But that method, it works, like I said, but it's just slow. It takes a long time. And maybe you're like me and you have other stuff you like to do. You like to play guitar, piano, go to the gym, whatever. You don't have all day to be sitting there trying to learn 20 vocab words in a month when you can just do it in one day. Along with that, once you do this, everything you ever watch or listen to becomes somewhat comprehensible. And that really opens up any kind of content you want to watch. Which leads me into reason 2. Vocabulary in isolation takes you very far. So even if you had no grammar, no idea how to formulate a sentence, nothing, all you had was vocabulary words and you could just pick and choose at random, you could still get your point across in a lot of ways. I did this a lot when I was living in Japan and it worked extremely well. And even when I was using the wrong versions of some words, my point was still across in the same way. So I really cannot stress how important it is to just have a large array of vocabulary words to choose from. And it works for understanding too. So say if you're watching Jujutsu Kaisen and the part where Nanami is talking to Itadori about Gojo and he's saying, この人は信頼している、信用している、でも尊敬はしていません, or something like that. Maybe you only know 信用 or 信頼 or 尊敬, which is trust and rely on and respect. And you can look at the tone of voice in Nanami and see that he's angry at the last part. You may know, oh, he trusts and relies on him, but he does not respect him. This is something that's going to go on subconsciously, but it's a process you'll really have to trust. But I promise you, if you do this with vocabulary up front, so many sentences and so many things are going to make sense, and you're not even going to realize how good you are at the language over time. For this reason alone, I believe it's important to just get a lot of vocabulary words done. But I will say this is probably the hardest part of learning a language. So yes, it's uncomfortable, it kind of sucks. But if you can get the very hard part out of the way initially, I believe the rest, it's not easy per se, but it does open you up to just having a lot more experience and a lot more flexibility with the language. Because again, our goal is to make the language work without really having to think about it. When doing this, by the way, just get the base word down. Don't worry about the different forms and the negative form and all that. It's okay to have an idea, but just study the base word. And again, a lot of this stuff will just come when you learn sentences. Now, how do you remember all of these words without forgetting them? Something I do and I've been doing for years is I use Mnemonic Associations. There's another YouTuber who does this as well, and I'll point to him later. He has a really good channel on language learning in general. But Mnemonic Associations are basically taking what you have and attaching it to something you can already remember or see in your head. So for example, the word Cheetah Castle in Japanese means to scatter around. Now, if I say 風が強くて、紙は全部散らかした, that means the wind was strong and scattered around all the papers. Cheetah Castle, the word, the way I remember that, as I literally think about cheetahs in a castle, and the cheetahs are running around, they're knocking stuff off the counter, jumping on the walls, all this other stuff. It's a goofy image, but it really sticks in my head. I only did this once, and this was maybe 7 years ago, and I've never forgotten that word. Another example is like in Turkish, if I said, Senin gülüşünü seviyorum, that means I love your smile or I like your smile. Senin, I think of that as sending a message. I send someone a message and now it's your message. So my brain thinks senin, yours. Gülüşünü, this is a dumb example, but I think of that as a sound that I make when I pet a cat and the cat smiles. So gülüşünü means smile. Again, you want to think in vivid images, whatever comes up in your head, you just want to run with that. Seviyorum, I think sounds like save your room. So in my mind, you save your room for someone that you love or someone that you like. So senin gülüşünü seviyorum, I love your smile. Another simple one is bu. In Turkish means this. So I think of Boo the ghost, like from Super Mario 64 or whatever, Super Mario, and he's pointing at something, saying this. And maybe there's a Turkish flag behind his head. Again, the more vivid, the better. That being said, this is a skill, and you're not going to be able to do it for all of them. That's fine. If you find yourself stuck on one, just come back to it another day or skip it in general, especially if it's a common word that you know is going to come up often. Maybe you don't have to create a mnemonic device for it. You can just understand that it'll be memorized anyways. Some words, even in Japanese, I could never think of one, but I've used them so much that they've really just been internalized and I don't have to think of one anymore. There's going to be several like this, so just try not to get too frustrated. And to add on to that, only you are going to be reading these, so you can get as crazy as you want, as wild as you want. Whatever helps you remember it, just go with that. No one's going to be opening up your Notion or Google Documents and trying to see what you have written down. Just get as crazy as you want to get. Okay, potential fear of mnemonic associations. You may ask, well, what if I remember the wrong thing? Like Cheetah Castle. What if you remember cheetahs instead of scattering around? Well, in my experience, I've never had a problem where I remember the wrong thing. I think our brains are pretty good at sorting out what's correct, especially because when you learn it in a sentence, the whole sentence has a meaning. So what did I say earlier?風が強くて、紙は全部散らかした. I think that's what I said. I'm not going to think about cheetahs because I just said the wind is strong. So wind is strong and papers, you can kind of get the rest from there. But in my experience, I never really had a problem remembering the correct thing. These days, I believe you can find full Excel sheets of vocabulary lists online, and then maybe you'll just have to add a column and add a association on the end. So if there's like 4 columns, just add a 5th one and add whatever helps you remember it. I may make some or find some and put it on my Patreon or Discord, but try to do it on your own. A lot of this is going to be a deliberate effort. But again, the time it takes you to do this, it may seem like a lot, but it's going to save you months, if not years of total practice. So it's worth really doing your homework on. And take your time with it. You may only get through like 20 or 30 a day. Not even that. You may only get through 10 and you're mentally exhausted. That's fine. Again, this is kind of a hyperbolic time chamber in a sense, where everything you do really accounts for months of work that someone else would do. So there's an idea I call an intervallic idea. And basically what this means is that the time between the word being shown and the mnemonic association and the meaning is going to be long for a while. It may take you a few seconds. But after you keep doing this, what's going to happen is that it's going to be instant. It's going to instantly go from the word to the meaning, and you won't think about anything else in between. It's just going to be very quick, just like it is in English or whatever your native language is. So Cheetah Castle, you won't think about cheetahs in a castle or any of that. Like me, I hear Cheetah Castle and I just think something was scattered around. That's it. I don't think about anything else anymore. This goes with vocab words and full sentences, by the way. You'll hear someone say something in an anime, maybe the entire sentence or the whole dialogue, and maybe you've heard that before or several times, and it's going to get to the point where you're not really thinking about it. You just understand what is being said. Okay, something to help this process is to listen to and repeat the words for good practice. I actually used to use the little Google Translate text-to-speech box because nothing else was really out back then. But you can find text-to-speech websites these days. I believe Natural Reader is one. Maybe I'll link some in the description or my Discord. But find something to help you hear it as you study it. That way you can kind of get the input and the output at the same time. When I say repeat the words, by the way, I do mean out loud. I know some people will argue that you should not speak from day one. I think you should speak immediately. As soon as you hear it, try to speak it, try to say it, just get it in your brain and get it working, because this is really going to help you in the long run. This may require you copying and pasting words one by one, but again, this is going to save you months, if not years of practice in general. So it's just something that you're going to have to do. But an alternative these days are Anki decks. And I believe these days there's full, maybe 5,000 words already laid out, and it has the sounds, it has sentences, has everything pretty much there. So you can just download that and get to using it right away. I'll say this again, by the way, learning vocabulary is the hardest part of the language, in my opinion. So if you can really get through this part, it unlocks the rest of the fretboard. I said fretboard, I'm sorry. The rest of the language. I'm thinking about guitar because I got to practice after this. But it unlocks the rest of the language, and you can really get your ideas flowing, and you can get the input that you want to get and start to listen and repeat after native speakers. Which leads me right into step 2. There's 2 parts to this, but the first part is listen and repeat after native speakers. I really want to emphasize native speakers because I speak Japanese in several shorts and just different content on my channel, but I don't have the best accent. I say things wrong and all that. You really want to prioritize native speakers. Take their sentences and what they say and say it like them, because they have a lot of the things that I don't. So really prioritize native speakers. So the importance of listening right away after the vocab is because sentences tend to blend together in Japanese and most languages really, and it's a very fast language. So you want to just start getting the repetitions in. This is going to be very difficult when you start, and you may have to listen to the same sentences 20, 30, 40 times, but that's a part of the process. Movies are fine, anime is fine, YouTube is fine. I would recommend finding something with human-made transcripts if it's YouTube. Things like the Easy Japanese channel or TED Talks or street interviews. Regardless of whatever method you use, understand that the fundamentals of the language are the same. So you can learn from anime, you can learn from YouTube, you can learn from TED Talks, but a lot of the fundamentals are going to be the same. Now, if you only learn from anime, there will be an adjustment phase, but it's not that bad. Believe me, you'll be fine. Just use discernment. Just like you would in English, you wouldn't say fight scene things at the restaurant and vice versa. It'll be the same in Japanese, and it's not that hard to decipher. You'll be fine. But understand that the fundamentals will carry over. This is optional, but use documents titled after the video you're watching to fill in vocabulary knowledge gaps. This is something I used to do for some things. Say I watch a TED Talk in Japanese and there's a lot of words that they use. I'll have a sheet named after that with the link, and I would have the vocabulary words there, create a mnemonic association, and so on. This was just if I didn't know the word already. Okay, step 2B, which is more important in my opinion, is to make or find several hundred sentences in every category around your life and drill those. This means basic interrogatives, small talk, things around work, school, where you're from, all that, hobbies, interests, anything like that evolves, anything that involves the same things that you would talk about in English. These are the things you want to do in the target language too. A note about translators and ChatGPT. I know people talk bad about it, but in my experience, they're actually really accurate. The problem people have is they don't know how to use them, and so they give it a bad rap. But if you use it correctly, in context, that's all you have to do, just use it in context. It's actually pretty good. Most of the Japanese I learned when I was at work in Japan was right from Google Translate. And I would say those sentences at work just fine and everyone understood me. I still got paid a lot of money and so on. But if you put in isolation words or just some random thought that doesn't have a context, it may give you the wrong meaning. ChatGPT is even better in my opinion because you can prompt it to say, hey, give me 30 sentences about jujitsu in Japanese, and it can just spit them out right away. And now you have practice for the next couple days right there. And a comforting note again, whatever you study, the fundamentals will carry over, especially certain things like combat sports. You'll have to learn how to say, if something happens, then do this. That fundamental is very useful in just normal language. In general, my opinion of sentences is that they're frameworks. And the more frameworks you learn, the better. And the more you drill these, all you have to do is change out the subjects and the vocabulary words whenever you need to. So me, in my brain, when I'm speaking Japanese, I basically say the skeleton of a sentence and then I just pick a vocab word to put in place. That's, in my opinion, that's how a language kind of works without you really having to think about it. And another comforting note here, we're not trying to be perfect, okay? I'm gonna tell you from firsthand experience, no one cares in Japan if your accent's off or you say a couple things wrong. No one really cares. Even at work, where I was getting paid to speak correct Japanese, no one cared. I still got a lot of money. I still had a lot of clients. Everything was fine. And honestly, I would say America is the only place where people get upset that you don't speak the local language. Like if you listen to me talk, I don't have the best pitch accent. Sometimes the consonants are not sustained like they should be, and so on. There's a lot of mistakes I can make, but it doesn't really matter, and it's never mattered.
We do not care.
Plus, I'm not Japanese. I have 0% Japanese, so to me, it really doesn't matter. If you're Japanese, well, if you're Japanese learning from me, that's crazy. But if you're Japanese, maybe it matters, but even then, just say, hey, I didn't learn it growing up. I learned it from some black guy on the internet. But if you're not Japanese, really, just don't stress it. I know some people, they hesitate to get the speaking practice in, or they hesitate to actually go use the language because they're too afraid of how they're gonna sound. They're too afraid of the input that they're gonna get or the feedback that they're gonna get. But I promise you it's okay. Okay, some other concepts to keep in mind is, I said this a little bit earlier, but use ChatGPT/AI. Do not have a conversation with ChatGPT because again, that's not going to translate to real life. You want to just get materials that will translate to real life. So ask it to give you sentences. Ask it to create conversations that you can practice out loud. Ask it to explain grammar to you. Ask it to explain the ways that it's used. Take a word, put it in there, and tell it to give you several sentences with that word. Just get really creative with it. But you can leverage AI in such a good way that you can get a week's worth of work done in just a few minutes of typing. And now you have an action plan for the entire week. So really leverage that. You know, it used to take me a long time to do this stuff from scratch. Notebooks, Google Docs, all that. Now you can just type it in and you got everything. Of course, this is still really hard work because you have to do a lot of deliberate practice, listening and speaking out loud and all that kind of thing. But you get a lot of the upfront work out of the way. Okay, I'm gonna talk about making the process fun. So as you can tell, everything I've said so far, it's not really that fun, studying a bunch of vocab words, drilling the same sentences. It's not really a fun process. So I would say on some days, if you need a break or you feel like you're a little bit burnt out, then you can opt for the more passive options, or you can just take a day off. But I would also add that maybe you should see the end result as fun. You know, watching Jujutsu Kaisen or JoJo's Bizarre Adventure or something with no subtitles. See that as fun. Take a break when you need to, and like I said, use passive methods when you want that break. But really try to push yourself a bit and see how much discomfort you can deal with and try to get to that goal, because that is way more fun than trying to watch kids shows in Japanese and all this other stuff, because you know what you actually want to watch. The quicker you can get there, the faster you can actually enjoy it. Okay, the next one is spaced repetition. In my experience, spaced repetition is a natural process that's just gonna happen. You don't have to schedule days, you don't have to schedule times. It can be 10 minutes, it can be a day, it can be a week. It's just gonna happen naturally. In general, when you're learning, once you kind of have it down, just move on to the next thing. If you know, I'm gonna use the same word, Cheetah Castle. If you can say it out loud and you understand the meaning, move on to the next thing. By the time that word comes up again, see if you remember it. That is a spaced repetition. You don't have to really calculate this. Okay, now I'm gonna talk about why I really believe in this method and why I believe it's the absolute best way to learn a language with my experience. And this is something I call the Hinata realization. So to make a long story short, I was working out at a gym in Japan, and the manager I used to talk to all the time wanted to hire me. So we kind of did the interview while I was resting between sets, and I asked him a lot of questions, and that was it. I got the job. However, the only problem was I was conversationally fluent, but I couldn't talk about anything a personal trainer would do. Or I didn't have a certification or any of that. I had 2 weeks to do this. So I had to learn about how to say all these fitness movements, breathe in and out, certain postures, certain positions, hydration, diet, nutrition, all this other stuff. Keep your knees outside of your toes when you squat, you know, all the trainer type stuff. I had 2 weeks to learn this stuff. And so basically what I did is exactly what I'm telling you here. I got all the vocab words I needed, and I started making a whole lot of sentences with Google Translate on just gym talk. I would just create sentences. I thought of every possible gym scenario that I could so I could fill in as much gaps as possible in that 2 weeks. The result of this is that a lot of the vocabulary words and sentences that I had trained at home with no one else, it actually came out pretty natural when I had to use it with clients. They all understood me just fine. I could understand the things that they were asking me. And it was a really big realization for me at the time. However, I was still having to process it. This is where the Hinata part comes in. My client Hinata at the time, this was the day where everything felt subconscious. And I had realized it about halfway through the session that the entire time I was not thinking. Everything she was saying, I was just processing it. And everything I was saying back to her, it was just coming out. Just one thought, the sentence came out and she understood me. This is why I call it the Hinata realization, because that day when I was training Hinata, it really clicked for me that this method is probably the best thing ever as far as language learning. I remember going home that day and just being really excited because that had never really happened to me before, as far as finding something that was extremely useful to work in that short amount of time. Now with all of this, it is difficult. Again, I think I said that before, but this is a difficult process. This is not an easy, effortless process. but it's fast. It's faster than you think. It's extremely fast. The problem with the fast part, though, is that you're cramming a lot of the pain into a small amount of time. But I truly believe it's worth it, because by the time someone else is just now learning how to say, oh, I want to go to the store in the morning, you can be watching anime and you only have to look up a few words. Okay, I want to talk about immersion real quick and why it does not work for most people. So immersion in general requires a lot of deliberate practice, okay? When most people say immersion, they think put on a podcast, listen to Japanese all day, and passively do things. I'm gonna tell you now, passive efforts don't really give you results as an adult. I think our brains, we just have too much to think about, and these passive efforts don't really do anything for us. Immersion requires a lot of deliberate practice. Many people I hear will say, oh, move to the country and acquire the language, and you're around it and you become fluent. That's not how it works. I can promise you now, you will never learn a language like that. Immersion is a deliberate practice that you have to do on your own, and then you use it when you can. I lived in Japan for about a decade, and I can tell you now, most of the foreigners I met did not know Japanese. Because ironically, Japan does have subtitles. I know that sounds weird to say, but everything you need to do has some sort of an English translation if it's that important. Now, your life is going to be extremely limited in Japan if you go there and you don't learn Japanese. But if you're just looking to get around or only hang out with your other American friends or people who speak English, you can actually get by just not knowing much Japanese. So I say all that to say, if your version of immersion is active and it's a lot of deliberate work, then yes, immersion is very useful. But if it's passive, or you think putting on Japanese audio while you go to the gym and all that is going to make you fluent, it's not going to do anything. Your brain's just going to tune it out and not much is going to happen. I also want to say this in a friendly way, not like an attacking way. So if you have been doing the passive way, I would just invite you to come on over to the active side. Okay, let's talk about the writing system now, because I haven't addressed this yet. In my opinion, this is what you should do. Learn hiragana and katakana. These only take maybe 2 weeks to learn completely, to the point where you can read Japanese. They're not that hard. Kanji, however, I would say do not touch it until you can speak and understand the language with confidence. To add to that, all kanji can be read with hiragana and katakana. There's this thing called furigana where the kanji is written and there's hiragana on top of it. So it actually allows you to read kanji when you need it. You can also use the computer to read kanji. It can put it in romaji, which is the characterized version, and that's what you really should be using. But kanji is something, again, you just want to wait. It's so much time you have to put into it for no benefit. So just be aware of that. Something else to note is the double consonants and the extended sounds and all that. Pay attention to that, because that is a big part of speech. But as long as you have that down in the hiragana part, you'll be fine. You really don't need kanji at all. And that's my experience, at least. And I believe this is just the most practical approach. When I was living in Japan, what I saw was a lot of people who didn't speak Japanese or understand it. On the inverse, they knew how to write it, they knew how to read some of it, they knew the grammar rules and all that. But when it came to actually talking to people, there was a blank that was drawn. There was really no skill there. And unfortunately, this is the traditional way that people think you should learn a language, when actually it's the opposite. You should learn to listen and understand and speak it and leverage those little things like grammar and all that to just speak and understand better. I read a lot of Japanese now, but this is a result of sheer exposure and just years of being around the kanji that I needed. I'm going to talk about this later as far as how I learned kanji on accident, but for now, just learn to understand and speak the language. So that's about it as far as this part. This is part 1 of this series. I'm probably going to make another video and get into more detail, but this video alone is like almost years of work. So please don't neglect that. Come back as much as you need to and revisit the parts that you need to as often as you can. You can also ask me questions on Patreon or Discord or in the comments. There's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot that's going on. There's a lot of rules that you kind of need to override in your head maybe, because this is a strange method, but it works. It's really the reason why I can speak Japanese the way I do and understand it the way I do. And not to sound like that guy, but I believe this is why other people don't have results. It's because the deliberate practice is key here. So just keep all this in mind and really stick with this process. And I'm going to put out more about this, so you should subscribe also, or I'm going to send Skuna to come get you. But I'm going to put out more information about this later and really help you guys out, because some people see language as this thing where it's impossible, especially Japanese. They see it as impossible, or they see it as you had to do it when you were younger, or your brain's not efficient and all this other stuff. But none of that's true. The key is just deliberate practice. And if you do enough deliberate practice, like I said earlier, it just becomes second nature. But at first, yes, it's extremely difficult. You have to think about everything in detail, the sounds, every little thing. You're gonna sound like you're translating in your head, but that's totally okay. That's the point. The point is to get all the repetitions in. And if you can keep that in mind when you're practicing, by the time it comes to use the language, like watch content and talk to people, it becomes easier and easier over time, because you're getting a lot of that stress out in your room, basically. You know, I remember when I first started learning, I was learning in my late 20s intently, but I remember all the limiting beliefs that I heard other people say. But then I thought about it and I said, well, you know, maybe they actually don't work hard. You know, and I'm not trying to say that in a rude way, but many people are confused about what they're actually doing or if they're doing things correctly. And so when I really just blocked all that out and I took my own method into account, it gave me so much results and so much clarity that I want that for other people. You know, even to this day, I'll watch anime or I'll watch content or I'll scroll reel. A lot of my Instagram is Japanese algorithm based, because that's what I watch, and I'll watch that stuff and I can understand it. And it still surprises me to this day, and I've been doing this for years. But I always think about how impossible I thought this was, or how I thought it would always be this, I have to translate and read sentences out of my head and I can't make it stick. But that's not true. Just really take the deliberate practice into account and you're gonna get the same results that I have, or even better, really. But if you made it this far into the video, towards the end, then I really believe you have it. You have what it takes to become fluent. I'm not some special superhuman, I'm not any of that. I just understand the basics of deliberate repetition and how that leads to subconscious mastery. And leveraging that is the absolute best thing I've ever done for language learning. And if you do this and really take the time to do it, 1 month of language study for you is really, I don't know an exact number or anything, but it's gonna be like 6 months of someone else doing the more drawn out method. So come back to this video whenever you need to, click through it, take some notes, all that, ask me questions, whatever you have to do. Just take these ideas in mind and try to get those results that you're looking for. And as a note, Japanese was the first language that I learned. I didn't speak anything before that. And I remember people telling me that I was crazy for learning Japanese first because it's so difficult for an English speaker. But again, just keep all this in mind. So I believe in you, you got it. I'm gonna play piano now. So I love you guys and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.